morning, LifeSpring Church. If you're new with us here today, I'm very, very glad you are here. My name is Mark. I'm one of the pastors here. Really excited to be journeying through this series called How to Be Happy. But before we jump into the sermon this morning, I want to make one public service announcement. This weekend is the last weekend to sign up for I Once Was Broke and Now I'm Not. So please get signed up online. If you are not even sure what I'm talking about, we are holding a community-wide finance class in order to help you, in order to help the community, help to take their first steps in what it looks like to find financial freedom. So if that's you, get signed up today. Invite your neighbors, invite your friends. Get on lifespringnc.com/money and sign up today. As I was prepping for this message today, and I was asking myself this question, how are we to be happy? I figured I would go to the wisest person I know, Google. So I went to Google and I asked Google, how to be happy, Google. Here's what Google told me. I'm going to read a few quotes, so listen up. Some of them a little lengthy, so just listen. The first and most fundamental, this is one of the first excerpts on Google. The first and most fundamental responsibility for a human being is to become a joyous being. To be happy is not the ultimate aspect of life. It is the fundamental aspect of life. If you are not happy, what else can you do with your life? Only if you are happy can other great possibilities open up. No pressure, right? Whatever you do, it is only your inner quality that you are going to spread. Whether you like it or not, that is reality. Unless something of true value happens within you, you cannot do anything of tremendous value to the world. So if you are concerned about the world, the first thing you must do, and listen to this, is to transform yourself into a joyous being. Let me read you from another source. It does not matter what you are pursuing in your life, whether it is business, power, education, or service. You are doing so because somewhere deep inside of you, there is a feeling that this will bring you happiness. Every single action that we perform on this planet springs from an aspiration to be happy. Listen to this, because it is the original nature that we have. When you were a child, you were simply just happy. That was your nature. The source of joy is within you, and you can take charge of it. Listen to this last quote I'll read you, and this one was from happify.com, okay? The research suggests that happiness is a combination of how satisfied you are with your life, for example, finding meaning in your work, and how good you feel on a day-to-day basis. Both of these are relatively stable, that is, our life changes and our mood fluctuates, but our general happiness is more genetically determined than anything else. The good news is with consistent effort, this can be offset. Think of it like you think about your weight. If you eat how you want to and are as active as you want to be, your body will settle at a certain weight. But if you eat less than you like or exercise more, your weight will adjust accordingly. If that new diet or exercise regimen becomes part of your everyday life, then you'll stay at this new weight. If you go back to eating and exercising the way you used to, though, your weight will return to where it started. So it goes too with happiness. In other words, according to 3 of the top few sources on Google, happiness is something that we can control. Happiness is something that is inside of you, and we must tap into it. If we were to form lifelong habits to reach out and find this inner joy that's inside of us, then we would find what true satisfaction and fulfillment is. But this morning, I want us to evaluate these claims. Is this really true? Is this really true? Can you really take control of this inner nature they say we have inside of us to be joyous and to be happy? Every day, whether it's on this college campus or in our community or across the globe, I talk with people all of the time that tell me about the things they're going through, and guys, it doesn't sound like happiness to me. I hear more of brokenness than I hear about happiness on a daily basis, and I think that many of you would agree with that. I talk to homeless people here at Smithfield Rescue Mission that are looking for shelter and food and hope somewhere. I talk to people that are here in our community that are jobless, and they're looking for some source of income to make ends meet. I talk to students here at JCC all the time who are cutting themselves just so they can feel something. I talk to people, even in this room, that are battling with terminally ill diseases, or maybe their family members are, and guys, they're in desperate need for hope. I talk to people in this community and around the world who have what you may consider a ton of money. They may be rich, but they're still lacking something. I see people more often in this community that have what you might consider a perfect life, the 2.5 kids, the dog, the picket fence, and the 2-car garage, but yet they're still unsatisfied. So if these people were to say that they were not happy, can we really say it's because they haven't tried hard enough? Can we really say it's because they haven't searched deep enough within themselves to find this inner joy that some of these sources say that we have? You see, last week, Pastor Dylan talked about this idea of our heart. Most of us think, and we hear the advice all the time, it says, just listen to your heart and let your heart guide you. But last week, we unpacked what the scriptures actually tell us about our heart, and that is that our hearts are not able to be trusted. Our hearts are deceitful and wicked, and who can know it, is what Jeremiah the prophet said. So the main problem that we face this morning is not that we lack the ability to find happiness from within, but we are looking for something that doesn't even exist. So happiness, as most people would define it, I would argue, is an illusion. It's not even out there. So this morning, what I believe we need to do is we need to redefine what is true happiness. So we're going to turn to the scriptures this morning. We're going to be in Psalm 139. We'll be looking at the Bible. If you don't have a Bible, completely cool. We're going to be putting it up on the screen. If you don't have a Bible at home, guys, we have free Bibles at our Next Steps tables when you get ready to leave. We love to give you and your family and whoever wants one free Bibles to give them to you. So we're going to be looking at Psalm 139 just to bring you guys a little up to speed in case you've never read the Bible. This is your first time. That's completely okay. This book is comprised of several books, but the book of Psalms was written about 1,000 years before Jesus ever walked on earth. So that dates at about 3,000 or so years from now. What's really cool about this, though, is since it is from God, it contains timeless truths for us this morning that I think are very, very relevant for us. So we're going to read along quite a few verses, so just track along with us, okay? Verse 1 says, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is even on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain." See, very clearly, the psalmist is amazed at the knowledge of God and the knowledge that God has of him. You see, God knows much more than just the things you do. God even knows your thoughts. He knows you completely, even to the very finest details, even the number of hairs that's on your head, God says he knows. But the key phrase I want to hone in on this morning is in verse 1. It says that God has known me. Now, this word known, many of us think about it as just head knowledge. But the knowledge that's described here is described all throughout the book of Psalm 139 and really all throughout the Bible. When it says that God knows you or God desires to know you, guys, this term knowledge is not just head knowledge, it's relational knowledge. It's personal knowledge. It's intimate knowledge. So if we want to understand what is happiness and how are we to have it, how do we expect to find it apart from the God who created you, apart from the God who wired you and made you just the way you are and who knows everything about you? What we need to realize this morning is that God is not some impersonal force. God is not some distant being sitting on his throne who created the world and then set it in motion and keeps his hands off of things. No. God is not a statue. God is a personal and relational God. He wants to have a relationship with us. This is how he has made us. You see, God, oftentimes in the scriptures, in fact, probably the most word that is used to describe him most is the word Father in the Bible. Because God wants us to see very clearly, he wants to relate to us as a father does his child in a loving and intimate relationship with us. How does this start? It starts by acknowledging the fact that he knows everything, which leads us to our first big takeaway. God's knowledge knows no bounds. God's knowledge knows no bounds. Let that sink in this morning. God knows even your deepest secrets. The ones you won't tell your family members or your best friend or your spouse. God knows. He knows your thought life. He knows even your motives. Even when you don't even know your motives, God knows. Guys, his knowledge knows no bounds. He even knows the depths of your sin. Even when you don't understand the depth of your sin, God knows. So before you even speak a word, he knows. He knows. Before you even do anything, don't pretend, don't hide. God knows. Now, for some of you smarties in the room, you're sitting there thinking, well, how in the world does God know everything about every single person on the planet? That seems illogical, right? I used to think the same thing, so that's why I call you smarties. But I've got a very scientific and thought-through answer for you this morning. That's why he's God and you're not. His knowledge knows no bounds, but guess what? Ours does. Look with me at verse 7. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there, your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me. Even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like day, for darkness is as light to you. You see here, the psalmist is reflecting on this idea that I cannot escape God. In fact, in verse 7, he says, I cannot escape you. It's not possible. Why is this? In verse 7, God is described as spirit. And this is very important for us to understand. You see, God is not like us. You see, God himself is spirit. He's not contained to one place and one time like we are. But yet, God sees all. God knows all. He is what theologians call transcendent and also immanent. He is both far but yet near at the same time. This is the God we serve. So according to verse 8 and 9, no matter where I go, I can't escape his presence. You can't escape him. He is there. He is both far and near at all times. The psalmist goes on to give the furthest extremes he knows. What if I go up to the heights of heaven or the depths of hell even? Can I escape God? You can't escape him nowhere, the psalmist says. You can't hide from him. Let me give you an illustration here. It may be helpful. Many of you know I've got a little boy. His name is Eli. He's a toddler. He's 3 years old. If you've ever played hide and go seek with a toddler, you'll be able to follow very close along with what I'm saying. Hide and go seek to a toddler is very different than a teenager. Hide and go seek to a toddler essentially means that they can't see you, not necessarily that you can't see them. So what Eli will do is he'll come and say, Daddy, let's play hide and go seek. So he'll come and he'll say, Daddy, close your eyes and count. So I'll close my eyes and I'll count to 10. He'll go run off and hide. Now, a typical hiding place for Eli is he'll skirt behind the curtains for the window. And, you know, curtains typically hang about a foot from the floor. So Eli will be behind it and he'll be back there giggling and stuff, you know, and having a good time. But I can clearly look and see his feet. It's obvious. But he thinks because he can't see me that I can't see him. In a lot of ways, guys, we feel the same way about God. Oftentimes, we may not acknowledge it out loud, but we think that God doesn't see what we're doing. We think that God doesn't know what we're thinking. We think that he doesn't know the motives behind what you do. But guys, hear me. He knows. You can't run from him. You can't hide from him. He knows, which leads us to our next main takeaway this morning. God's presence knows no bounds. God's presence knows no bounds. For you math nerds in here, maybe this will be helpful for you. The famous mathematician Blaise Pascal said this in reference to God. He said, God's center is everywhere, but his circumference is nowhere. Right? That's mind-blowing to think about. Let me repeat it again for some of you guys a little slower like me. Blaise Pascal said in reference to God, his center is everywhere, but his circumference is nowhere. When we reflect on this reality that God knows all, and he sees all, it should honestly bring us to awe of him. As we reflect on God's nature, it should never leave us where we are. It should always move us This is what God does. So it should bring us into awe as we reflect on the fact there is 7.6 billion people across this globe. That's presently. That isn't including people of the past. Presently. Yet God knows every detail about them. He even knows their motives. He's there. He sees everything. Guys, this should make us in awe of this great God. It should also make us have a healthy fear of God. And when I say fear, most of us think of being scared. God doesn't want anyone to be scared of him, but he does want us to have a healthy fear of who he is. This God who is so vast we can't wrap our minds around. He is both a holy God, a just God, and a loving God. But guys, we have to realize this God could squash us just like that if he wanted to. And he absolutely despises sin. His very nature will not allow sin in his presence. This is God. It should make us have a healthy fear of him. But thirdly, it should give us also great comfort. Because this same God who knows all, he's always there. There's never a moment in your life where God is not near. Never a moment. In the moment you're in your deepest depressive thoughts, in the moments you're having the greatest sense of anxiety or the deepest sense of fear or the deepest pain you've ever experienced, God is there. He's always there. Listen to the tenderness of God in verse 10. Even there, speaking of the farthest of far places that the psalmist can reference, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. So you may be wondering as we're working through this passage, what in the world does this have to do with being happy? What does this have to do with being happy? God knows everything about you, yet he cares deeply for you. He cares more about you than you could ever care about yourself. So this leads me to my next big takeaway this morning. Happiness is not found in who you are, but rather whose you are. Happiness is not found in who you are, but rather whose you are. What do I mean by this? Most of us in here, and every person I typically talk to about this idea, they describe happiness as something that is all about them. It's all about you. What can I do to make me happy? We tend to primarily view happiness as something that I must achieve, something that I must initiate, something that I have to control. It's all filtered through this lens that I'll call self. In a lot of ways, you are the own God of your life in that instance. You dictate how you view your circumstances. You are the one who determines your happiness, or so you think. However, God has made us to look at life far differently. He's made us to look at life through the lens of who he is, not necessarily who we are. You see, I was never made to be in control of my own destiny. I don't care what any TV preacher says. This is not what the scriptures teach. I was never made to dictate my own life, and I'm not dismissing the fact that all of us have free will. But listen, the God who knows all, the God who is everywhere, he is in control, not you. He is in control. But here's the thing about it. He wants to be your loving Father. He's not a God who doesn't care. He wants to be in a loving relationship with you. So happiness will never come from you finding it within. Happiness will never come from you establishing happiness from your own identity. You can't produce happiness apart from God. Let's continue to unpack this idea in verse 13. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know them full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in that secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. The psalmist acknowledges here that God made every aspect of him. It wasn't some undirected science. In fact, I believe we can get a very simple but accurate definition of science here. You see, science is rooted in the study of God's creation. Science answers the how, philosophy answers the why, but both are rooted in God. Look at verse 14 with me. You see, the psalmist can't help but to praise God as he reflects at the fact that he is wonderfully and remarkably made. Do you hear the value and the purposefulness behind God's creation in this passage? Do you hear it? You see, God didn't just create you for fun. He didn't create you with no purpose, but rather he created you with a purpose. Let me give you an illustration here that may help. How many of you ever seen the show How It's Made that comes on Discovery Channel? Been playing it for years, yeah. So they typically take a product that most of us are familiar with, and they take you to the plant or wherever it's made, and they show you from step A through Z how that product is made. Now, it never fails. When I first watched the show, I'm like, oh, this will be cool. But as you watch it, and as you watch the creativity and the complexity that goes into the process to make these products, at the end of the show, I have this like very, very deep appreciation for this product, because I see how all the thought process and the design that goes into this product. In very much the same way, the psalmist here is reflecting on humanity, God's prized creation, and he's saying, wonderfully and fearfully made are we. God has put tons of effort and purpose into making us. So for many people, this idea of happiness is wrapped up in our self-image. We think that how I view myself or how others view me will determine my happiness. And tons of people struggle with self-image, to be honest with you, especially you women in the room. I know this is something that we struggle with. So hear me this morning when I say this. God created you wonderfully. He made you with a purpose. He made you just as he saw fit. So when we think these negative thoughts of ourselves, guys, listen. God made you wonderfully. Don't allow yourself to lie to yourself to tell you otherwise. God made you just as you are. Think about what we're saying of God when we struggle with self-image. And this isn't to beat you up. I just want you to reflect next time you struggle with the image of yourself. Are you trying to tell God that he has made a mistake in some way? Are you trying to tell God that he could have done better when it comes to making you the way you are? Guys, don't go that route. God made you just the way you are, and we are to live in that and to trust him to use us, the person that he has made you, to accomplish his works. Take confidence in God, not in yourself. Look at verse 16 with me. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Even while we were formless, God had a plan for your life. You see, God is outside of time. He's outside of space. So he knows everything about you before you were even formed, before you were even conceived. So before your mom and daddy turned the Marvin Gaye song on in the background, he knew you. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, stay tuned, because in a few weeks, we're doing this series in the month of February called The Naked Truth. And I promise you, it will become very clear what I'm talking about, because we will leave no stone uncovered in that series. So before a baby is a baby, even when they are formless, they have value to God, and God has a plan for them. So no matter your social status this morning, God made you. You have value, and God has a plan for your life. So no matter your economic status this morning, your money situation, God made you, God has given you value, and he has a plan for your life. So no matter your skin color this morning, God made you. You have value, and God has a plan for your life. You see, God values all people, and LifeSpring Church, we should too. This is not a political issue. This is a God issue. We must place value where God places value. Value is not determined by our society. Value is not determined by the laws of our land. God determines value. This is why we celebrate Martin Luther King weekend this weekend. Because Martin Luther King Jr., he saw that every person was created by God and they possess value. Not because people or societies or the government gives them value, but because God does. So at this point, as we reflect on this great God and how he has made us and how he knows all things, yet he sees all things, he is present at all places, his knowledge knows no bounds, his presence knows no bounds. If you think you can wrap your mind around this God, you're wrong. This God that we serve is vast and great. Verse 17 says this, how precious to me are your thoughts, God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. When I awake, I am still with you. You see, his knowledge and his presence is incomprehensible. A reflection of his nature should bring us to our knees. So this morning, if you think that you can find happiness apart from this God, you are mistaken. This leads us to our next big takeaway. You were not made for happiness. You were made for God. You were not made for happiness. You were made for God. I'm not saying this morning that God does not want you to be happy. Don't hear me say that. Hear me out here. Many of us spend our lives chasing this fleeting dream of happiness. But it's like a moving target that continues to move. I feel like if I get to this place or if I accomplish this accomplishment or if I get this much money, then I will be happy. But it's like a moving target and we never actually get there. It's because you were not made for happiness. You were made for God. Let me give you an illustration that could help out here. So this is a baseball bat, and Pastor David has already threatened my life if I swing it up here around his equipment, so I'm going to be very, very careful, okay? So I grew up playing a lot of sports. That's just part of who I was, and I played a lot of baseball, and I was always a pretty decent ball player, but when I got into 8th grade, I was playing on the middle school baseball team, I began to really, really struggle hitting the ball. Really, really struggle. And I'm, by nature, the way my parents, I guess, brought me up or whatever, I'm a really hard worker, and I was very determined to not be a bad hitter that year. I said, I'm going to work through this, I'm going to work through it, and I'm going to become a better hitter. So I would stand in the batter's box, and I would get my friends, my coaches, whoever it was, to throw me as many pitches as I could in order that I could become a better hitter. Now, I took as many batting practice swings as I possibly could, and what that resulted in was a season where I hit 100 as a batting average. Okay, and if you don't know anything about baseball, that's essentially hitting the ball 10% of the time. 9 times out of 10, I struck out or got out. That's terrible. That's very bad, okay? So needless to say, my self-esteem had been beat up a little bit after that baseball season. So come to my 9th grade season, I was determined once again to become a better ball player, become a better hitter. So I stood in the batting practice that first week, and my coach watched me take cuts, and he said, Mark, he said, if you want to become a better baseball player, want to become a better hitter, come with me. I'm sitting there thinking, Coach, if I want to become a better hitter, I need to stay in this batting box and keep taking cuts. I need to keep swinging at pitches. I don't know why you asked me to follow you, but whatever, I'll do it. So I went and followed him. He took me over to the chain link fence at the side of the baseball field, and he said, Mark, do this. He said, hold the butt of the bat up against your belt loop and hold the other end of the bat. I'm going to touch David's piano there up against the fence, okay? Being very careful, David, sorry. But he said, if you hold the butt of the bat there and hold the end of the bat at the fence, he said, then I want you to take 100 swings and you better not let that bat touch that fence, okay? And I'm sitting there thinking, what does this have to do with hitting the ball? I'm swinging at a fence. This don't make any sense. But I trusted him. I did it. I took 100 cuts. The next day I showed up at practice. He said, Mark, I want you to take another 100 cuts before you do anything else. I took 100 cuts. Every day for the rest of that season, that coach made me take 100 cuts at that fence. What I slowly saw happen was my batting average slowly started to climb. It slowly started to climb to the point to where I actually became the best hitter on the team that year, all because of what this coach pointed out to me. You see, my problem was that I spent all of my time trying to learn to hit the ball. But in fact, what I needed to be doing was learning the proper technique, how to swing the bat. I was completely in the wrong realm of understanding what my problem was. You see, when we chase after happiness in this life, we're chasing the wrong thing. God has made you to chase after Him. You see, happiness is a fleeting goal, but He is not. He is always there. And yes, you may find happiness temporarily in certain things in this life. I'm not going to say you won't, because I have. But you see, God is the only one that can provide true fulfillment, true happiness. The famous author C.S. Lewis said this, and I think it'll be really helpful. And I will warn you, this is a long quote, so read along with me on the screen. What Satan put into the heads of our remote ancestors was the idea that they could be like gods. could set up on their own as if they had created themselves, be their own masters, invent some sort of happiness for themselves outside God, apart from God. And out of that hopeless attempt has come nearly all that we call human history: money, poverty, ambition, war, prostitution, classes, empires, slavery, the long, terrible story of man trying to find something other than God which will make him happy. The reason why it can never succeed is this: God made us, invented us as a man invents an engine. A car is made to run on petrol, and it will not run properly on anything else. Now, God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn, or the food our spirits were designed to feed on. There is no other. That is why it is just no good asking God to make us happy in our own way without bothering about religion. God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from himself, because it is not there. There is no such thing. You see, when we seek happiness, we will never find it. We'll never find it. God did not make us to seek happiness. He made us to seek him. But when we seek happiness in God, then we will find God. You see, happiness will be a byproduct as we seek God, but we will not find it apart from him. But we have to be careful. God is not a means to an end to find happiness. He's not some tool that we have in our tool bag in order to achieve this greater thing called happiness. No, God himself is what your heart craves. So if we want to be happy this morning, it comes by seeking God. This leads us to our final takeaway this morning, and it's this idea that we opened up with. I believe what we need to do is we need to redefine what happiness is, what true happiness is. And so in reflection of Psalm 139 and the rest of the scriptures, I believe we should describe happiness like this. Happiness is being exactly who God made you to be, doing exactly what God wants you to do, and helping others to do the same. Happiness is being exactly who God has made you to be, doing exactly what God wants you to do, and helping others to do the same. If I can be real with you guys just for a moment, this is a part of my story. Most of my life, especially as a teenager, I chased this dream, this fleeting dream of finding happiness. And I didn't realize it at the time. Many of you are probably in the same boat that I was in. I was chasing satisfaction and fulfillment in things that couldn't give it to me. I thought that if I had the respect and the admiration of my peers, if I had the right reputation, then I would be happy. Never found it. Never found this happiness that I sought after. I thought that if I were the best sports player even, maybe I would gain the respect of my neighborhood, my community, maybe even the county, the state that I was in. Guys, I never found that fulfillment I was looking for. I thought that maybe if I got a certain degree, got a certain job, made a certain amount of money, I would be happy. But guess what? It was fleeting. I got to a certain point and I thought I'd arrived, but in reality, I still was desiring to be happy. Many of you are in the same boat this morning. You've been chasing this fleeting dream of happiness your entire life. You thought that if I get this certain job, if I get this certain home, if I have these certain kids, if I get a spouse, then I will be happy. But guys, you see, these dreams are fleeting. The happiness that you're looking for is not found in things, not found in people, it's found in God. What I quickly realized, and what you guys need to realize as well, is that what I was seeking after was God, but I had a major problem. My heart was sinful. My heart was rebellious from God. All of us, according to the Bible, have this same problem. Our sin separates us from God, so while we want to know God, even though we don't know it, we can't get to him on our own. This is what sin does. Sin separates you from this loving Father who created you wonderfully, as the psalmist said. Sin separates you so far from him that you can't bridge that gulf on your own. This is the whole purpose we celebrate Jesus so much here at LifeSpring. Because Jesus became a man, he is God, he stepped down to earth, became a man, he stood between God and you. He stood between God and me, and he said, instead of giving them the punishment that they deserve, cast it on me. So when Jesus died on the cross, he took every sin that you had ever committed, that you ever would commit, even your motives of your heart, and he bore the wrath and the punishment for you so that you do not have to. Now you may be wondering, what does this have to do with anything? Guys, through that work on the cross, then God said, by faith in the cross, by faith in my resurrection, now you can be brought back into this loving relationship that you were made for. This is what you're made for. You're not made for anything else. Happiness apart from God cannot be found. Happiness is found in a relationship with God. And God tells us, if you will call out to him, he will save you. By faith alone, there's nothing that you can do to save yourself. God sent his son to the earth to be your rescue plan, to bring you back into a relationship with God. And this morning, that is step one, to step into a relationship with God.